Microplastics linked to increased risk for heart attack and stroke, a new study finds. So, no longer do we just have to watch our cholesterol intake, we're gonna have to watch our plastic intake. But don't worry, with any luck, scientists have also discovered that boiling water takes away 90% of the plastics or microplastics within it. Hello, welcome back once again to another episode of Focus, and thanks for joining. Okay, so yes, I know I covered a story like this before, but there's going to be an added extra bit, yeah? The boiling water solution. But for now, microplastics linked to increased risk for heart attack, stroke, a new study has found. A first of its kind study found the presence of microplastics in arterial plaque in humans. Researchers found that microplastics in arterial plaque were associated with an increased risk of heart attack, stroke, and death. The study doesn't prove causation, and more research is needed to investigate this link. Microplastics and nanoplastics, or microscopic bits of plastic, cast off into the environment. They have been found everywhere, from oceans to food to human breast milk. Despite growing recognition of microplastics as an environmental hazard, the health effects of these minute particles still isn't well understood. Now, in what is being hailed a landmark study, researchers have identified microplastics in human arterial plaque and linked them to adverse cardiovascular outcomes, such as heart attack and stroke. The study was published a few months ago in the New England Journal of Medicine. This is a new space and definitely a wake-up call. Dr. Rick Ferraro, a general cardiology fellow at Johns Hopkins Medicine who wasn't affiliated with the research, told Healthline. This is correlation, so it doesn't prove causation. That being said, just finding microplastics in plaque at all is pretty concerning. Then, to have this association with the subsequent cardiac outcomes is quite striking, he said. 60% of patients had microplastics in their arteries. The major findings of the study were two. First, the identification of nanoplastics in the atherosclerotic plaques. Second, the patients with arteriosclerotic plaques contaminated by nanoplastics had a greater incidence of cardiovascular events, such as myocardial infarction or stroke or death, than patients who did not have evidence of nanoplastics within the atheroma plaque. Dr. Raffaele Marfella, a professor of medicine at Università degli Studi delle Compagnia Luigi Vanvitelli in Italy. And apologies if I butchered that once again. The first author of the study, who told Healthline. For the study, Marfella and his team looked at samples of arterial plaque of more than 250 patients undergoing a plaque removal surgery known as a carotid endarterectomy. They found the presence of polyethylene microplastics in nearly 60% of patients, while polyvinyl chloride microplastics were discovered in about 12% of patients. Polyethylene and polyvinyl chloride are two of the most common manufactured forms of plastic and are used in everything from bottles to construction materials. Over an average of 34 months following the surgery, patients with the microplastics in their arterial plaque were 4.5 times more likely to experience a severe cardiovascular health outcome, including heart attack, stroke, or death, compared to individuals whose arteries didn't contain plastic. However, the study does not show causation, meaning that it does not prove that the health outcomes are due to the microplastics or other causes. This study includes patients who were already at higher risk because they had a carotid plaque. They already had carotid plaque that was significant enough to require surgery. However, it is sobering and concerning to see how strong the downstream cardiovascular risk was for patients with microplastics in their plaque, said Dr. Aaron Ade, Director of Vascular Medicine at the Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Ade wasn't affiliated with the research. How plastic can end up in the plaque. Over 380 million tons of plastic are produced every year. Plastics are incredibly durable, which is one of the reasons they are so popular. When they begin to break down, they shed tiny plastic particles into the environment. Microplastics, particles smaller than 5 millimeters, and nanoplastics, particles smaller than 1,000th the nanometers, have been found almost everywhere, including some very unlikely places. A study from 2022 discovered the presence of plastics in breast milk. In 2023, researchers found significant amounts of microplastics in cliff caves in a cliff cave in Missouri, even though the cave has been closed to the public for the past 30 years. Tiny plastic particles have been discovered in the Mariana Trench and other areas of the deep ocean, sometimes tens of thousands of feet down. And just for the record, the Mariana Trench is the deepest point in the ocean. So if plastics are down there, we're really... Anyway, I digress. They are in our food supply and in our water supply. They are even in the air we breathe. The prominence of microplastics has increasingly led researchers to wonder about their potential on human health. Microplastics and nanoplastics can enter our circulatory system and can be detected in various organs, including the heart. In animal studies, they can cause harmful changes to the heart and blood vessels. But we haven't had any large human studies until now, said Ade. Understanding the health impacts of microplastics. The study published this month is proactive, but there's much more work to do before the health effects of microplastics can be proven to affect the heart health or our general health. Experts contacted Healthline stress that large-scale studies need to be undertaken before that can happen. Several also pointed out the need for better demographic and environmental data for the participants. There are huge disparities in terms of environmental exposure and the people who suffer from the negative effects of environmental exposures. This study didn't look at zip code or who was affected where, said Ferrero. We would certainly like to see this study repeated with a larger number of patients and in other parts of the world, said Ade, who pointed out that the individuals in this study were mainly from the same location and were the same ethnicity. We need to understand the cardiovascular risk of microplastics and nanoplastics in other regions as well as other races and ethnicities. The bottom line, a groundbreaking new study found the presence of microplastics and nanoplastics in human arterial plaque, as more or less our blood vessels, just so you got that clear. The presence of microplastics in plaque was associated with a 4.5-fold increase in the risk of heart attack, stroke, and death. And I know I've said that a few times. But like I also said, more research is needed to prove causation between the presence of microplastics and the cardiovascular diseases outcomes, which, like I mentioned before, are a few. But swiftly moving on, because like I said, not only did I have that little tidbit, I've got the solution, or scientists' so-called solution. So, boiling water may help remove up to 90% of microplastics. A new study finds that you can reduce the amount of microplastics you drink simply by boiling your water. Scientists are just beginning to understand the health risks associated with microplastic exposure, as said in the previous article. Nano and microplastics, as I said before, are bits of plastics as tiny as 1/1000th a millimeter in a diameter. Boiling and filtering your tap water may dramatically lower the amount of microplastics you drink, according to new research. But before we go any further, I'll say, depending on where you live in the world, boiling water is standard procedure, if you know what I mean. It's what you do before you drink water from anywhere, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, recent studies have found that nanoplastics and microplastics, or NMPs, which are bits of plastics as tiny as 1/1000th of a millimeter in diameter, have been found in a host of products and even in tap water. A new study published on the 28th of February in Environmental Science and Technology Letters found that boiling mineral-rich water for just 5 minutes can reduce the amount of NMP you're exposed to by up to 90%. Scientists are just beginning to understand the health risks associated with microplastic exposure, but growing evidence suggests the plastics can accumulate in the body and trigger oxidative stress and inflammation, and also an insulin resistance, as well as liver issues. Certain advanced water filtration systems can capture and help remove some NMPs from tap water, but researchers wanted to figure out other options to remove microplastics, especially since in poorer countries, cheaper, more accessible solutions for clean water are needed. Boiling water may be a safe, simple solution that can effectively decontaminate household tap water, the new study's findings suggest. Boiling water before drinking is a great example of an ancient cultural practice that can help reduce an environmental exposure. Dr. Luz Claudio, PhD, a professor of environmental medicine and public health at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, told Healthline. Claudio was also not involved in the study. How boiling water can help remove microplastics. The researchers found simply boiling water is the first step to removing NMPs, or nanoplastics, from tap water. The researchers collected multiple samples of tap water from the Gansu in China and contaminated the samples with varying levels of NMPs. Each sample was boiled for about 5 minutes, then left to cool for 10 minutes. Boiling hard water that's rich with minerals such as calcium or magnesium creates a chalk-like residue known as limescale or calcium carbonate, CaCO3, which can trap the plastics. That solid chalky residue, I'm sure that all of you see if you do boil water in a pan or if you're getting ready to make spaghetti. You've seen it. That residue then had to be separated and removed from the water with a standard coffee filter or stainless steel filter, thereby removing the NMPs. The team found that the impact was greatest in harder water. In samples that had 300 milligrams of calcium or CaCO3, for example, nearly 90% of NMPs were removed. In softer water samples, less than 60 milligrams of the calcium carbonate, roughly 25% of the nanoparticles or NMPs were removed. What's important to note here is that the effectiveness of trapping these micro or nanoplastics in the mineral solids is tied to how hard the water is. Or another reference, the acidity, the pH level of the water, just to get you on track. The harder the water, the more solids are formed, the more microplastics are trapped. Dr. Anna Brandon, PhD, the Associate Director of U.S. Plastics Policy at Ocean Conservancy and an environmental engineer, told Healthline. Brandon was also not involved in the study. Why microplastics are found in tap water? Microplastics such as polystyrene, PS, or polyethylene, PE, or polypropylene, PP, and polyethylene terephthalate, PET, are commonly found in groundwater and surface water, mostly due to wastewater and surface runoff after rainfall. According to Claudio, it's hard to study the health effects of microplastic exposure since there are many types and we are exposed to several potential sources regularly. And if you follow the last article, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I digress. Though the health risks are poorly understood, the inhalation and ingestion of microplastics has been shown to impair cell functions, disruption and trigger inflammation along with oxidative stress. The most well-documented short-term effects are on the gut microbiome, which can lead to intestinal issues, says Claudio. Like I said, there's been an increased uptake in bowel cancer you understand what I'm saying. Once again, I digress. Traditional water treatment plants aren't able to eliminate NMPs from drinking water, and while some water treatment technologies are able to capture and remove tiny plastic bits, these advanced systems do not exist in developing or underdeveloped countries, which is a big problem. According to Brandon, microplastics have been found to contaminate most, if not all, drinking sources. The researchers estimated that the intake of NMPs via boiled water is, depending on the region, 2 or 5 times less than what's ingested through regularly drinking tap water. That said, hard water is often an undesirable quality in tap water, and many households have filtration systems that soften mineral-rich water, says Brandon. More research is needed to inform if and when people should boil their tap water, she added. Not to mention the way you filter it. How to limit your exposure to microplastics. Anyone who wishes to boil their water should do so in a glass or stainless steel pot, because boiling it in a plastic kettle is defeating the purpose, and that's just my admit. After boiling the water for about 5 minutes, let it cool and do not stir it, says Claudio. The microplastics need to bind to the calcium and fall to the bottom of the pot so they can get filtered or scooped out. Keep in mind the boiling water is not a magic solution, says Claudio, as we are likely constantly exposed to other sources that contain microplastics. Brandon recommends avoiding single-use plastic packaging, including bottled water, not using plastic utensils and cooking products, and not putting plastic containers in the dishwasher or the microwave. All of these items can shed plastic particles or leach chemicals with long-term regular use, Brandon says. But the bottom line, boiling and filtering your tap water may dramatically lower the amount of microplastics you drink. According to the new research, scientists are just beginning to understand the health risks associated with microplastic exposure, but growing evidence suggests the plastics can accumulate in the body and trigger oxidative stress, inflammation, insulin resistance, gut health problems, and liver issues. And I'm pretty sure they mentioned somewhere before about I think cell breakdown or cell degradation, one of the two. But like I said, Earth is an amazing place, and what's amazing about it now is the fact that we've got a plastic planet. I know, it's not funny. It's quite scary. It's in our plaque, it's in our blood, it's in babies' placentas before they are even born. So what are we going to do about it? Once again, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Focus, and thanks for your time and your patience. Take care. Okay, hello. Thanks for sticking around for the thoughts and facts section. And just to cover a few bases and a bit of the nitty-gritty, the PS, the PE, the PP, and the PET, all of these polystyrene, polyethylene, polypropylene, and polyethylene terephthalate, all of these are oil-based plastics. That's where they come from, the manufacturing process. Many of these are used as heat resistance, waterproofers, you name it, it's in something, especially in food packaging in order to keep our food fresh. And I've mentioned this before, the amazing space station that's in space, plastic is what seals the deal. The submarines that are down at the depths of the ocean, once again, plastics is what seals the deal. Your car when you're driving it, Once again, plastic is what seals the deal. But if you would like the full breakdown of all of those things, I advise you to check out some of the other podcasts I've done on it, because this has been an ongoing story for probably 2 years now, and it is finally hitting the headlines. But that's not the point. The point is, from my point of view, the fact that it did touch on it, the filtration systems. We do have more advanced filtration systems at our access, but they are not readily available or accessible in poorer or underdeveloped countries. That being said, in poorer and underdeveloped countries, there is a widespread use of not polystyrene, polyethylene, or propylene PVC pipes. Yeah, they are widespread and widely used all over many small island countries, Philippines, the Caribbean islands, British Virgin Islands even maybe. You don't really see old networks like you see in major cities. England, for example, based on a Victorian system, I believe, that's running on copper pipes. I don't know, don't quote me on that. America itself is running on, I won't say an even older version, but theirs is falling on the wayside of capacity. I mean, there's been this whole talk on how do you call it, sponge cities, but that's an entirely different topic. The point is the fact that microplastics are found in water everywhere now, in the rainfall, Mount Everest, and as it mentioned, the Mariana Trench. These are places where people will struggle and probably die just to reach, which has been done. But plastics, in their nearly immortal selves, have got there with ease. Like I said, or like I mentioned in the previous article, half-life. These chemicals have a lifespan of between 50 to 300 years. And the outlook is that we are not going to stop using plastics anytime soon. And even when this also mentioned that boiling water is a solution, listen carefully. It's said to make sure that these boiling procedures or processes are carried out within glass or metal objects. Doing it in a kettle, I know it might sound like, well, I do this every day. I boil my water in a kettle and I drink it. It truly isn't the same. If you truly have a look at your kettle, it's hard plastic, polypropylene, the harder, sturdier version. Yeah, it's actually what they use to make those PVC pipes that carry water in small island countries. But the point is, every time this water is heated, every time the plastic is heated, it expands and it contracts, and every time it does this, it fractures and it breaks off microparticles into the water constantly, every single time. You don't only have to worry about the lime scale or descalers in your kettles, but the plastic is a true concern. I mean, long before any of this came to the surface, and when I say this, I mean this whole conversation about microplastics or plastic in the water, even before the problem was just the fact that we were finding plastic everywhere. It was the fact that it wasn't being recycled. It was for the fact that it could not break down easily in the environment. And then recycling was born, or recycling was pushed on a much larger scale. And even then, I did an article covering the fact that, lo and behold, the manufacturers of all of these plastic products have been lying, because to recycle them is no easy feat. There are 7 different main types that are in circulation all the time, and you can only recycle each with their own. So you cannot mix and match them. There is no 2 combinations that can work together. Each one of them has to be recycled individually, and that is where the cost is. And that is where we have been, how can I say this, manipulated or lied to, because we have been put under the illusion that so long as we recycle our plastics, they're reuse will be safe. The manufacturers of these plastic products have been well aware for many years that a lot of these plastics can only be recycled and have a good use maybe once or twice. So that means anytime after that, it's defeating the purpose. All you are truly doing is making the plastic itself more fragile. And every time you put it through this recycling process where you break it down, reform it into the plastic pellets, and then you reshape it into a plastic bottle, you are effectively causing more harm not only to the environment but to ourselves. Because now this plastic is in a state of rapid decay or already fractured. And when you see it is now passed on to new bottles, it's going to break down. It's one of the reasons why, and if you look on plastic bottles or any water bottle or beverage maybe, it will specifically tell you that you need to keep these things out of the sun. Now, just for the record here, sun is actually a natural sterilizer. So sun beaten on water for days upon days upon days actually does, the heat from it actually does sterilize it to a degree. The problem is, whilst the water is within these plastic bottles, when it gets heated, the plastic expands, and when you see it contracts, it breaks down. So plastic is released. And there's something else you should notice about those plastic bottles. Many of them, I find it funny, but it says to you that you need to drink the water within 3 days. Whether or not it's the water itself going bad, which is kind of hard to picture, because if you see it's sealed in a airtight container, it shouldn't, right? The reason for this is because of the plastic breakdown. From the moment that you open the bottle, the oxidation process begins on the inside of the bottle. And it's this oxidation process that gives that, plastic taste when you drink something, which is what I was getting at the beginning. Long before all of this, I'm pretty sure people noticed and they used to say, this tastes like plastic. But no one truly put one and one together to understand the true ramifications of this. And if anything, and you are probably a frequent microwaver and you have many storable, microwavable containers that many people use today, those ones that click around the sides? Yeah, everyone has them, or you've definitely seen them. But they're very dangerous, because most times when someone stores food away in them, when they come to use them, they don't often take them out of this plastic container, which they should. And the reason I say this is because I'm sure you notice, if you do heat up or your plastic container is exposed to hot food of any color, what happens? It changes the color. That food, that coloring actually seeps into the plastic. That alone is a red flag. That alone should let you know that it has gotten into the actual physical plastic. It has seeped into it. So vice versa, it seeping in, plastic has broken out. It's a shame that it's taken this long. But this has come from many, many studies. The one most alarming and concerning one, if you do recall, the very first one I did mention in this, was the fact that an entire town in America, and I mean an entire town, over, I think, either 2,500 residents or 5,000 residents, one of the two. You could quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on one of those figures. Every single one of them tested positive for plastic in their blood. And at the time, what we know now about the fact that these microplastics, nanoparticles, can easily pass between the cell membrane. So what we have seen is the buildup in the, what they call it, atherosclerotic plaque. But what it's, how can I say, eluding to mention is the fact that it being caught in the plaque is probably a good thing. And the reason I say this, and don't misunderstand me or misjudge what I'm saying, is because if it can get caught in the plaque, that means it's not passing through our cell membranes. And cell membranes is what you cannot see. It's what's within the blood. It's practically your blood cells, microscopic. If plastic can be so small to break into a cell where it can disrupt the nuclei and cause it to not function, we are seriously looking at a problem. And I know I mentioned a very, very out there or drastic solution, but I still think it is viable. And the reason why I say this is because, once again, look at a space station, or even then vice versa, a submarine. The amount of microplastics floating in the air alone is reduced dramatically because of the level of the air filtration systems that they actually have on board. So whereas our entire planet, and this is where it gets alarming, our entire planet has been contaminated with aerosolized particles of plastic. Do you understand how scary that actually is? It's in the rain when it falls onto your skin. Particles so small that can pass through your cell membrane. So understand this very well and very clear. That means when a drop of water falls on your skin, if you let that drop of water dry on your skin, there could be drops of microplastics in it. And just pressing on it can either make it go into your skin membrane or finger. Either one, your epidermis. And from there, what's going to happen? Who knows? There's also been an increased uptake of skin cancers as well. Who knows if this is down to plastics? Like the study said, there has been, this study proves or is pointing to a correlation, not so much a causation. And as it also said, it was a pretty limited study. It was only done in one location and it was only done on one ethnicity, which honestly I find a little mind-boggling. Maybe for the fact that the area where it was held, there was a larger population of that ethnic, population. But in the world we live today, I find it hard that there wasn't a little bit of diversity. Don't get me wrong when I say that, but you do understand what I'm trying to say. But like this study said, it was a limited and it was localized. But remember, like I also said, another one was carried out in another town, I think at least 2 years ago, which also pointed at the fact that everyone in that town was exposed to high levels of nanoplastics, or the way they phrased it at the time, forever chemicals. And due to this, a lot of them actually had to go to the hospital. And I know I've mentioned this a few times, but it's for the fact that it's only because this or those two studies were targeted at these people were they able to understand that these people in particular were at risk. Everyone needs to take a real hard look at themselves. Like I said, all of these little aches and pains we're feeling right now, you never know what it may be down to. Yes, there's a lot of chemicals in everything we eat and consume, in the water that falls as it is, far less to have to deal with plastics. And even playing in your background with your children, I say, walking down the road and smelling half the fumes that come out from cars, or driving on a motorway and constantly breathing in literally thousands and thousands of cars' exhaust. No one knows how this truly affects us. Many cardiovascular problems, many lung diseases and respiratory illnesses, and only recently has they been, solid, how can I say it, cause and correlation and cause pointed to bad air quality affecting and causing deaths. So before it gets to the point that people are dying from this, like I said, we need a more solid solution than boiling water. Don't get me wrong, because the only problem with this is, let's say a large amount of the water will probably be wasted. Think about it. Boiling it in any pan or any glass pot, you will have to keep it still. It's going to be pretty hard to scrape out anything from the bottom of it and keep it clear. So you're going to have to take the water out of each container or tip it to a side, which is not advised, because the moment you tip it to a side, all the sediment at the bottom, which is supposed to have captured the microplastics, is going to shift, and you're going to see that cloudy form just flowing in the water, and that's not what you want. So how much water you will be able to get to will be limited. So it's not going to be an easy task. So then you'll have to get to the point here, or quickly move on and think into the future of, you need a device literally targeted and be able to do this. So it needs to, probably sit underneath a certain level so that what's at the top it can capture, or maybe have some kind of boiling device that closes off the bottom completely, which is where the sediment is, and airtight or watertight, in order to pour the top of it, which has settled. But either way, it's going to be slightly complicated. And yes, boiling water is a simple method, but to do this constantly in a poorer country is no cheap task as well. You can boil it on fires, but honestly, when you see your boiling water on open fire, using wood, the smoke itself often gets into the water. So yes, the carbon, that smoky taste. So it's hard to do stuff like this unless you've got it proper ventilated, have a way to do it, and the fire doesn't get to it, or you'll have to do it very slowly. Everyone has different methods, but even using gas or stove to do this in poorer countries, not every country has, set or laid down gas lines, like let's say America, Russia, the Ukraine, or Scandinavia, Iceland, the UK. You don't see gas companies laying pipes all over the place. So what you often find is, those burger vans. I'm sure you've seen a food truck around every now and again. So you see those tanks that are at the back of it, or maybe you might have seen it on the inside of it. But those tanks is what you normally get gas in, and their capacity is limited. To have to boil water constantly like that could put people out of pocket, could save their lives, but it's not going to be easy, considering, and I really hate to mention this, cost of living and how expensive everything is getting. But at least they are coming up with solutions. But I still think, considering that we know now what we didn't know then, it's one of those things, I hate to say it like this, but it's like AIDS. When this thing hit down, we put our best minds towards it, and we tried to come up with a cure, a treatment. Right now, you need to come up with surgeries, filters, air purifiers, or like I said before, sterile microenvironment. Not sterile, like I said, I get caught up when I say that word. It makes it sound a little, the island, or out there, some creepy thing. But a secure biodome, an environment where the entire habitat or temperate climate is managed, but sterile to a degree nonetheless. So I'm not saying devoid of animals or insects. I'm saying you need to fully include all of this: mushrooms, plants, fungus, everything in between that everyone might not actually agree with would actually need to be part of this ecosystem in order to not create or put people in a situation where they lose their resistance to nature, to the outside world. It will not reduce their immune system or compromise it to any degree, if you understand what I'm trying to say, which I'm sure you do. Apologies. But like I said, it's a serious problem that we need to address, and I just think that honestly people are still looking at it like slightly blasé. Like they said, it's only alarming, but these doctors should really see it at truly how do you call it, sense of urgency. There should be a higher level there, but that's just my opinion. But once again, thanks for giving me a minute of your time. Like I said before, our history is pretty vast and we're making it pretty fast. And in 300 years' time, I really hope our legacy wasn't that we turned our planet into plastic. Once again, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Focus. Take care, have a great day, and make it stay that way. For links to the articles, check out the episode description. If you want to leave a comment, check out the trailer description for the email address. For topics like these and more, check out future episodes. Like I said, the world is an amazing place. There's a lot going on, and sometimes we just need to take a moment to focus.